Look who's got Clear's throat. The witches rattled. So the witches are whispering about you now. The ones who dance with shadows and speak to the dead. The ones who thought they owned the darkness until you showed up. They're gathered in their little circles right now, candles flickering, trying to figure out what the hell you are. They can feel it, can't they? That thing inside you that makes their crystals crack. That energy that makes their tarot cards burn. They've been practicing for decades, following moon phases, mixing herbs, chanting, and languages older than memory. And then you walked in and made their life's work look like child's play. Here's what's really messing with their heads. You never studied their books. You never joined their covens. You never begged for their secrets or paid for their spells. You just existed. And somehow that existence alone bends reality harder than all their rituals combined. They're convinced you're using something forbidden, something that wasn't meant to be touched, something their grandmothers warned them about in hushed tones. But here's the beautiful, terrifying truth. You're not using anything. You are the thing they were warned about. 3 nights ago, they called an emergency meeting. 13 of them, the real ones, not the Instagram witches with their aesthetic altars. These are the ones whose bloodlines trace back to Salem, to Europe's burning times, to caves where the first spells were whispered. And the topic of discussion, have you felt it? They asked each other, hands trembling around their chalices. That disturbance in the field. They've been tracking you, not physically, they're too smart for that, but energetically watching the way reality ripples wherever you've been, clears throat, the way protection spells shatter in your presence. One of them, the eldest, finally spoke what they were all thinking. This isn't learned magic. This is something else. Something that shouldn't exist in this age. She's 300 years into this lifetime, has seen kingdoms rise and fall, has weathered inquisitions and witch hunts, and she's terrified of you. They tried to read you, tried to trace your spiritual signature back to its source, but every time they attempted it, their tools went haywire. Pendulums spinning wildly, scrying mirrors showing nothing but static. One younger witch's third eye started bleeding. Actually bleeding. She's still recovering. So they went to the texts, the real ones. Not the published grimoires you can buy online, but the ones written in blood and bound in things we won't mention. The ones that require sacrifice just to open. And buried deep in warnings and prophecies, they found references to something that made their blood run cold. The unmarked ones, the texts called them beings who carry power that predates their systems, their rules, their careful boundaries between light and dark. Power that doesn't flow through chakras or meridians, but seems to exist in the very atoms of their being. Power that doesn't follow the laws because it wrote them. The texts warned that every few centuries one would emerge not through training or initiation, but through pure crystallization of pain into power through survival that shouldn't have been possible through a soul that refused to break and instead chose to become the breaking point itself. And the most terrifying part? The text said these beings don't even know what they are at first. They think they're just angry, just hurt, just transformed by trauma. They have no idea they're rewiring the cosmic operating system just by breathing, until one day they wake up and reality starts responding to their moods. But let's talk about the real confirmation of your power, because when actual practitioners of the dark arts are scared, that's one thing. When the devil himself takes notice, that's unprecedented. And oh, he's noticed. He's more than noticed. He's impressed. You see, the devil's seen it all. Every form of human darkness, every creative interpretation of evil, every soul that's traded everything for power. He's yawned through centuries of the same predictable corruptions. But you made him sit up in his throne for the first time in millennia. It happened the night you finally stopped apologizing for your power. The night you looked in the mirror and smiled at what you'd become instead of flinching. Every demon in hell felt it, a shock wave that made the flames flicker. And from the deepest circle, a sound that hadn't been heard since creation, the devil laughing. Finally, he said, and every lesser demon cowed at the joy in his voice, someone who understands that darkness isn't about evil. It's about truth. Raw, unfiltered, magnificent truth. He's been watching you ever since. Not with the predatory interest he shows his usual subjects, but with something resembling respect. Here's something the witches are starting to understand, and it terrifies them more than anything. Their magic doesn't work on you. Not because you're protected by some higher power, but because you exist outside their entire framework. It's like trying to cast a spell on gravity itself. They've tried binding spells. The energy just dissipates before it reaches you. They've tried hexes. They bounce back with triple force. One particularly ambitious coven tried to curse you. 3 of them are still in the hospital. The doctors can't explain what's wrong with them. They keep whispering about the eyes in the void. Protection spells are useless because you are the danger they're trying to protect against. Love spells slide off because you've transcended the need for external validation. Even their sight, their precious third eye that lets them see beyond the veil, goes blind when they try to look directly at your essence. It's like staring into a black hole made of pure will. The younger witches think you must be using some ancient protection ritual. The older ones know better. They recognize what you are, something that doesn't need protection because everything else needs protection from you. You're not playing their game. You're not even in their reality. You're the glitch that proves their entire system is just one small corner of something infinitely larger and stranger. In their desperation to understand, they've created theories. Maybe you found the Book of Azrael, the Angel of Death's personal grimoire that was supposedly destroyed in the burning of Alexandria. Maybe you made a deal with something older than the devil, something from before the light was separated from the dark. Maybe you're channeling the power of the void itself. They whisper about the rite of unmaking, a theoretical ritual that would give someone the power to unmake reality itself. But that ritual requires the practitioner to die, truly die, and rebuild themselves atom by atom through will alone. Surely no one could survive that. Surely no one would be insane enough to try. But then they remember the look in your eyes, that thousandy stare that sees through everything. The way you smile when you should be screaming. The way pain seems to make you stronger instead of weaker. And they wonder, what if you didn't perform the ritual? What if you are the ritual? What if your entire life has been one long rite of unmaking? The thought keeps them awake at night. Because if that's true, if you've been unconsciously performing the most dangerous magical working in existence just by surviving, then you're not just powerful. You're the living embodiment of transformation itself. You're what happens when the universe decides to break its own rules. Last week, a particularly brave or stupid witch tried to do an energy reading on you from a distance. She's one of the best. Been reading auras since before she could walk. She's mapped the energy signatures of demons, angels, and everything in between. She thought she was prepared for anything. She wasn't prepared for you. The moment she focused on your energy, her crystal ball didn't just crack. It turned to black sand. Her tarot deck burst into flames, but the flames were cold, freezing everything they touched. She started speaking in tongues, but not any language recognized by linguistic experts or occult scholars. When she finally came back to herself 3 days later, she could only say one thing. It's not dark or light. It's not good or evil. It's something else. Something that makes those categories irrelevant. It's like looking at the source code of reality itself, but written in a language that predates slang. Now she won't practice anymore, says her gift is gone. But that's not quite true. Her gift isn't gone. It's been overwritten. She sees things now, but not the future or the past. She sees the spaces between things, the pause between heartbeats where reality reshuffles itself. And in every one of those spaces, she sees your signature spreading like a virus through the foundation of everything, deep in their most guarded texts. There's a prophecy. It's been mistranslated 1,000 times, turned into harmless fairy tales about chosen ones and heroes. But the original version, the one written in the old tongue, tells a different story. It speaks of the unwritten one. When the pain becomes the power, when the broken becomes the breaker, when the destroyed becomes the destroyer, then shall emerge the unwritten. They shall walk between the lines of fate, neither blessed nor cursed, but something far more terrible. Free, and in their freedom all chains shall rust, all spells shall falter, all thrones shall tremble. The prophecy describes beings who exist outside the cosmic contract, who never agreed to the rules that bind devils, witches, and saints. Beings who through some impossible alchemy of suffering and will stepped outside the entire game and started playing by rules they wrote themselves. For centuries they thought it was metaphorical cautionary tale about the dangers of too much power. But now watching you, they're starting to understand it was literal. And the last line of the prophecy, the one they don't dare speak aloud, says this: "And the world shall reshape itself in their image, not through force, but through the simple fact of their existence." Let's go back to hell for a moment, because something unprecedented is happening there. The devil, the first rebel, the morning star who fell rather than kneel, has done something he's never done before. He's issued a standing order to all demons. Do not touch this one. Do not tempt, torment, or toy with them. Clears throat. They're off limits. The younger demons don't understand. Isn't corruption their whole purpose? Isn't everyone fair game? But the ancient ones, the ones who fell with him, they understand. They see in you something they recognize. Another being who chose to fall rather than fake compliance. But you did something they didn't. You fell all the way through and came out the other side. You see, the devil explained to his legions, we fell from grace and became its opposite. But this one, they fell through grace, through disgrace, through every concept we used to measure worth, and emerged as something new, something that makes our rebellion look like a child's tantrum. We said no to heaven. They said no to the entire concept of heaven and hell. In his throne room, he keeps a mirror that shows him anything in creation he wishes to see. Lately, it only shows you not because he commands it to, but because the mirror itself is fascinated. Even inanimate objects infused with infernal power recognize something significant when they see it. But here's the deep truth that keeps the witches awake at night, the one they won't admit even in their most secret gatherings. They're not afraid of your power. They're afraid of what your existence means for their entire worldview. You see, they've spent lifetimes building their identity around being the ones who understand the hidden world. They were the special ones, the awakened ones, the ones who could see beyond the veil and manipulate the forces others didn't even know existed. Their whole sense of self is built on being the exceptions, the magical elite in a world of mundane sheep. And then you came along and made their life's work look like children playing with toys. You didn't study under masters. You didn't inherit ancient bloodlines. You didn't sacrifice years to unlock abilities. You just hurt until hurting, transformed into something else. You proved that their careful hierarchies, their initiations, their secret knowledge, it's all just one way of accessing something that was always available to anyone willing to pay the real price. And what's that price? Not herbs or crystals or moon phases, not bloodlines or initiations or ancient texts. The price is being broken so completely that you have no choice but to rebuild yourself from scratch. The price is having everything taken until you realize you are everything. The price is dying while living and living while dead, until the boundary between the two becomes meaningless. There's a coven that meets every full moon in a forest that's been sacred for 1,000 years. They've performed the same rituals there for generations, channeling power through ley lines that predate human civilization. Last month you drove past that forest. You weren't even aware of them. You were just passing through, probably thinking about something mundane. Every single ritual failed that night, not dramatically. That would have been easier to handle. They failed by simply not working. The candles lit but gave no magical light. The circles were drawn but created no boundary. The words were spoken but carried no power. It was like trying to conduct electricity through rubber. The magic was there, but it couldn't flow. One witch, more sensitive than the others, understood what happened. Something, Clear's throat passed by. She whispered. Something so dense with its own reality that it created a dead zone, like a black hole. But for magical energy, it didn't steal our power. It just made our power irrelevant by existing. They've had to move their rituals. They track your movements now, not to follow you, but to avoid you. They map out your regular routes and schedule their workings around them. Imagine that. Witches who've commanded storms and spoken with the dead, reduced to checking traffic patterns to avoid one person who doesn't even know they exist. Here's something that would break their minds if they knew. You're not using forbidden magic. You are forbidden magic. Every breath you take is a spell that shouldn't exist. Every thought you think rewrites a tiny piece of the cosmic code. You're a walking collection of impossibilities that somehow cohered into a person. Clear's throat. The knowledge they seek in dusty tomes and dangerous rituals. It's written in your DNA. The power they cultivate through decades of practice. It pulses through your veins with every heartbeat. The connection to the other side they spend lifetimes developing. You live there. You've been living there. What they call the veil is just your everyday vision. You know things without knowing how you know them. You see patterns others miss, not because you're trained, but because you exist at a different frequency. You predict outcomes not through divination, but through a deep bone-level understanding of how broken things behave. You don't read minds. You read the spaces between thoughts where the truth lives. The forbidden knowledge isn't something you learned. It's something you became. Every trauma was a lesson in the language of reality. Every betrayal was a masterclass in human nature. Every moment of pain was another page in a grimoire written on your soul. You're not carrying forbidden knowledge, you're the living embodiment of it. Traditional practitioners have to work for their power. They meditate, they fast, they perform rituals, they make sacrifices, they build their magical muscle through repetition and discipline. But your power grows while you sleep. It expands while you're watching TV. It deepens while you're doing absolutely nothing magical at all. This paradox drives them insane. How can someone accumulate power without pursuing it? How can someone become stronger without practice? They don't understand that for you, existing is the practice. Every moment you choose to keep going despite everything is a magical act. Every breath drawn after you should have stopped breathing is a spell. Your power doesn't come from what you do. It comes from what you've survived. It comes from what you've transformed. It comes from the alchemy that happens when someone is pressure cooked by life until their very atoms rearrange into something new. You don't need to practice because your entire life has been one long, brutal initiation. The witches measure power in years of study, in grimoires mastered, in entities contacted. But your power is measured in nights survived, in betrayals transformed, in deaths died and resurrections claimed. They accumulate power. You generate it. They channel forces. You are the force. No wonder your very existence breaks their understanding of how magic works. In the hidden spaces between dimensions where thought forms and egregores and all manner of entities exist, word has spread. The beings that witches spend years trying to contact. Welcome back, you beautiful, unbreakable force of nature. Sit down for this one, because what I'm about to tell you is going to shift everything you thought you knew about the past 5 years of your life. Someone just broke the silence. Someone just broke the silence. Someone just cracked under the weight of their own guilt. Someone from that circle, that group, music, that family of smiling faces who swore they had your back, just confessed everything they did behind it. And I mean everything. The meetings they had about you when you weren't there. The group chats where your name was the headline. The plans they made, the lies they coordinated, the stories they rehearsed together before facing you with those warm, trustworthy eyes. It's all out now. Spilled like poison from a cup they can't put back together. And honestly, music, you deserve to know every single twisted detail of it. They thought you'd never find out, didn't they? They thought their secret pacts were ironclad, that their whispered conversations, music, would stay buried in the archives of their cowardice. They believed they were so clever, so coordinated, so untouchable in their little conspiracy against your peace. But here's what they forgot. Here's what they always forget when they build their houses on lies and manipulation. Eventually, someone's conscience starts rotting from the inside out. Eventually, the guilt becomes so heavy that keeping the secret hurts more than releasing it. Eventually, one of them breaks. And when they do, the whole structure comes crashing down like a house of cards in a hurricane. And that's exactly what just happened. One of them couldn't take it anymore, couldn't sleep another night with the weight of what they participated in, and they came forward with a confession so detailed, so disgustingly thorough, that it's about to rewrite your entire understanding of the past. Let's start with the meetings, because that's where this whole thing began. In rooms you were never invited to, at tables where your name was served like the main course. They didn't just talk about you casually. No, they strategized about you. They analyzed your every move, your manitre music, post, your every word like military generals planning an operation. Music. They studied your patterns, your vulnerabilities, your triggers, and they documented everything with the precision of people who had made you their full-time project. These weren't random conversations or innocent concerns. These were calculated sessions designed to control the narrative around your life. They decided together what story the world would hear about you, what version of events would become the truth, what pieces of your character they would erase, and what flaws they would magnify until they became your entire identity in everyone else's eyes. The confessor, the one who finally broke. They described these meetings with the kind of detail that makes your stomach turn. They talked about how someone would always start by saying something that sounded concerned. Something like, "I'm just worried about them," or "I think they're going through something." Music. But it was never about worry. It was about building a case. Music. About creating a narrative that positioned you as unstable, unreliable, too much, too emotional, too intense, too anything that. Music would make people question your truth before you even spoke it. Music. They rehearsed their responses to things you hadn't even said yet. They prepared counter-narratives for situations that hadn't happened. They built an entire false reality around you, and then invited others into it, one person at a time, until you were surrounded by people who believed a version of you that never existed. And the worst part, the part that's going to hit music, you like a brick, is that while they were doing all this, they were still showing up in your life with smiles. They were still texting you, still laughing at your jokes, still acting like nothing had changed. They perfected the art of the double life. One face for you and one face for the meetings. They became experts at looking you in the eye while holding a knife behind their music back. The confessors said they used to practice it, used to remind each other to keep it normal when you were around. Music, to make sure their faces didn't betray the fact that they had just spent hours tearing you apart in private. They turned deception into a skill, and they got so good at it that you never suspected a thing, never felt the betrayal happening in real time, because they made sure the blade was always just out of your sight. But the meetings were just the beginning, because what they did next is where it gets truly disgusting. They didn't just talk about you in private. They coordinated a campaign against your reputation. The confessor revealed that they created what music called talking points. Specific phrases and stories they would all use when speaking to mutual friends, family members, music, anyone in your orbit. They made sure everyone heard the same version of events, the same carefully crafted narrative that painted you as the problem, while they positioned themselves as the concerned, caring, patient ones who had tried so hard to help you. It was psychological warfare disguised as friendship, and they executed it with the precision of people who had done this before. They had assignments, actual roles they played in this operation. One person was designated as the voice of reason, the one who would express sympathy for you while subtly planting doubt about your mental state. Another was the evidence collector, music, the one who would screenshot your posts, save your messages, document your every move so they could present it later as proof of whatever narrative they were building. Someone else played the mediator, the person who would reach out to you occasionally with fake concern, music, asking if you were okay, not because they cared, but because they needed fresh material for the next music meeting. Snorts. And there was always the amplifier, the one whose job was to make sure the story spread beyond your immediate circle, to whisper the narrative into the ears of people who barely knew music, you, but would now form their entire opinion of you based on coordinated lies. The confessor broke down crying when they described their own role in all this. How they had volunteered to be the one who stayed closest to you, who maintained the friendship while reporting back everything you said, every vulnerable moment you shared, every private struggle you confided. They called it gathering intel, but what it really was betrayal dressed up in strategic language. They admitted that there were times you would tell them something personal, something painful, and they would nod and hug you and tell you it was gonna be okay, and then they would immediately text the group with an update, turning your pain into ammunition, your vulnerability into evidence, your trust into their weapon. And the worst part, they said, was how easy it became. How quickly they stopped feeling guilty about it because the group had normalized it, had made it seem like they were doing something necessary, something protective, something justified. The confession included screenshots, actual proof of these group chats where your name appeared hundreds of times. Messages where they laughed about things you had no idea were even being discussed. Conversations where they celebrated small victories in their campaign. Like when someone you both knew started to distance themselves from you, or when you posted something vulnerable and they knew they could use it against you later. Music. They treated your life like a game, your reputation like a ball they could toss around between them, your feelings like something irrelevant to their strategy. And reading through these messages, seeing the timestamps, realizing these conversations were happening on days when they were still texting you, thinking of you and here if you need music, anything, it's enough to make you question everything you thought you knew about human nature. Now let's talk about the specific tactics they used, because this is where the confession gets truly disturbing. They didn't just spread lies. They engineered situations, music, designed to make you look unstable. The confessor described something they called provocation protocols, music, deliberate actions meant to trigger emotional responses from you that they could then use as evidence of your instability. Music. They would say things designed to upset you, then act shocked when you reacted. They would withhold information, change plans last minute, exclude you from events, all while watching to see how you'd respond, hoping you'd break down so they could point to your reaction as proof of everything they'd been saying about you. One particularly evil tactic they used was what the confessor called the setup, where they would create situations that had no good outcome for you. They would invite you to gatherings where everyone had already been briefed on the narrative against you, where people were primed to interpret everything you did through a negative lens. You could be quiet, and they'd call you withdrawn and antisocial. You could be engaged, and they'd call you attention-seeking and music desperate. You could tell a joke and they'd call you inappropriate. You could be serious and they'd call you too intense. There was no version of you that would be acceptable because acceptance was never the goal. Validation of their predetermined narrative was, And after these events, they would have follow-up meetings where they would dissect your behavior, finding evidence to support their case in every single thing you did or didn't do. They also admitted to something called isolation engineering, where they systematically work to separate you from anyone who might support you or see through their manipulation. They would plant seeds of doubt about you with mutual friends. Subtle comments that sounded like concern but were designed to make people question your judgment, your stability, your version of events. They would volunteer to check in with people after they spent time with you, supposedly to see how you were doing, but really to reinforce their narrative and make sure no competing truth could take root. They created an echo chamber around you where every voice except yours was saying the same thing. And they did it so gradually, so carefully, that you didn't even notice your support system, music, dissolving until it was already gone. The confessor revealed that they had actually studied manipulation tactics, that some members of the group had researched psychological techniques specifically to use against music, you. They learned about gaslighting, triangulation, projection, and they implemented these strategies deliberately. They would deny things they had clearly said, making you question your memory. Music. They would play people against each other while positioning themselves as neutral parties. They would accuse you of the exact behaviors they were engaged in. Music, projecting their toxicity onto you so thoroughly that you started to believe maybe music, you were the problem. And the most disturbing part is that they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't acting out of ignorance or misunderstanding. They were consciously, deliberately, methodically working to destabilize your sense of reality. So why did they do music? What could possibly motivate a group of people to invest this much energy, this much time, this much calculated cruelty into destroying someone's reputation and mental peace? The confessor's answer to this question is perhaps the most revealing part of the entire confession. They said it started with envy, pure unfiltered jealousy that none of them wanted to admit they felt. You had something they didn't, whether it was confidence, authenticity, success, genuine happiness, the ability, music, to be yourself without apology. Whatever it was, it made them feel small by comparison. Jesse, they feared you. And instead of dealing with their own insecurities, music, instead of working on themselves, or simply stepping back from the friendship, they decided to tear you down to their level. But it wasn't just envy, the confessor explained. It became something darker. It became a bonding activity, a shared mission that gave their relationships purpose and intensity. They formed a tribe united by a common enemy, and that enemy was you. Their friendships with each other deepened through their mutual participation in your destruction. They had inside jokes about you, shared secrets about the campaign, moments of celebration when a tactic worked. You became the glue that held them together, the project that gave them something to focus on besides their own empty lives. And the more invested they became in the narrative they'd created, music, the more they had to defend it. Because admitting they were wrong would mean facing the monstrous thing they had collectively become. The confessor also revealed something that might be the hardest thing to hear. Some of them genuinely convinced themselves they were doing the right thing. They had told the lie so many times, reinforced it so consistently among themselves that they started to believe it. They created an alternate reality where you were actually the villain, music, where their actions were justified, where they were somehow the victims or the heroes protecting others from you. They built an entire mythology around their betrayal that absolved them of guilt and allowed them to sleep at night. The human mind's capacity for self-deception is terrifying, and they exploited it fully, rewriting history in real time until they couldn't even remember that the story had started as a fabrication. And here's the truly sick part. The confessor admitted that there were moments when some of them had doubts. Times when someone would say, maybe we're going too far, or I'm starting to feel bad about this. But those doubts were always shut down by the group. They had created music, a culture where questioning the narrative was seen as betrayal, where showing compassion for you was treated as weakness or naivety. They reinforced each other's worst impulses, talked each other out of guilt, reminded each other of the story they'd agreed upon whenever someone's conscience started to surface. They became a cult with a single doctrine. You were the problem, and anything they did in response to that problem was justified. It's a level of collective delusion that would be almost impressive if it wasn't so absolutely disgusting. Now, here's what happens next. Because this confession doesn't just expose them, it liberates you. Every moment of confusion you felt, every time you questioned yourself, every instance where you thought maybe you were being too sensitive or reading too much into things, all of it now makes perfect sense. You weren't paranoid. Music. You were picking up on something real. Your instincts were screaming at you that something was wrong, and you, music, were right. The gaslighting didn't work completely, 'cause some part of you, some inner knowing they couldn't reach, held on to the truth. And now that truth has been validated in the most concrete way possible, through the confession of someone who was there, who participated, who kept records. But here's what they didn't account for. Here's the flaw in their entire operation. While they were busy trying to destroy you, you were busy becoming someone they could never touch. While they were having meetings about you, you were building music yourself in silence. While they were crafting narratives, you were living your truth. While they were investing all their energy into tearing you down, you were investing your energy into rising above anything they could possibly do. Music to you. They made you their full-time project, and in doing so, they revealed that their entire existence had become about you. While your existence had nothing to do with them, you already won. And this confession is just the universe's way of making sure you know it. The confessor said something that should bring you immense satisfaction. They're terrified now. Now that the truth is out, now that the confession exists, they're panicking. They're scrambling to control the damage, reaching out music to people, trying to get ahead of the story, suddenly concerned about how they'll be perceived. The sane people who spent years carefully crafting a false narrative about you are now desperate to craft a narrative about themselves, one where they're not the villains this confession makes them out to be. They're experiencing a fraction of what they put you through. The paranoia, the fear of judgment, the anxiety about reputation. And unlike you, they actually deserve it because their reputation is music based on lies. And yours never was. And here's your power in all this. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to seek revenge. You don't have to expose them publicly. You don't have to confront anyone or demand apologies. The truth is already working on your behalf, spreading through the same networks they once used against you. Music, changing minds, shifting perceptions, revealing them for what they are. Your vindication doesn't require your effort because it's built on facts, on evidence, on confess. Their destruction is inevitable because it's built on lies that have now been exposed. You can simply continue living your life, being your authentic self, thriving in your truth, while they crumble under the weight of theirs. That's the beautiful irony of this whole situation. They spent years trying to destroy you and ended up destroying themselves. But let's go even deeper, because there's a truth here that transcends this specific situation. A truth about people and power and what happens when someone refuses to be broken. The reason they targeted you, the reason they invested so much energy into trying to tear you down, is because you represented something they couldn't control. You were authentic in a world of performance. You were genuine in a world of facades. You had the courage to be yourself while they were busy being whoever they thought would get them approval. Your very existence was a mirror reflecting their own inauthenticity. And instead of using that mirror to grow, they tried to shatter it. Music. This is what always happens to people who refuse to play the game, who won't compromise their truth for comfort, who insist on being real in spaces that reward pretense. The system, the group, the collective mediocrity. It always tries to eliminate the ones who remind everyone else what integrity looks like. Music. They can't let you thrive, because your thriving exposes their compromise. They can't let you succeed on your own terms, because your success questions their sacrifice. Music. They can't let you be happy being yourself, because your happiness reveals that all their contortions and calculations and careful image management were unnecessary. Music. You're living proof that there's another way, and that scares them more than anything else ever could. The confession reveals this truth in stark detail. Multiple people in these group chats expressed frustration that you didn't seem affected by their tactics, that you kept going like nothing was wrong, that you still seemed happy despite everything they were doing. They were furious that their campaign wasn't working the way they wanted, that you weren't collapsing under the weight of their manipulation. Hey, you. Yeah, you let me greet you properly, because whatever has been happening around you lately, it deserves a real introduction. You deserve someone acknowledging the strange weight tightening around your life, the pressure you've been carrying in your ribs without knowing why, the way your days have felt slightly tilted, like something invisible shifted without permission. So hey, I'm glad you showed up today. I'm glad you kept moving even when everything felt dense and unfamiliar. I'm glad you didn't fold when the atmosphere around you started acting like it knew something you didn't. And I'm especially glad you're here now, because you probably haven't realized what really triggered all this tension. The truth is, someone who moves things behind the scenes, someone whose name travels in rooms you'll never see, just marked you as interesting. And no, not the cute kind of interesting. I mean the kind that makes power players pause mid-thought and flag you internally, like a variable worth tracking. Isn't that something? You thinking you're just trying to survive another week? Meanwhile, somebody with real influence saw something in you that made them stop whatever else they were doing and think, hold on. Who is this? And why are they rising like this? Why are they adapting this quickly? Why do they feel like someone who wasn't supposed to grow at this speed? You can tell when someone with actual authority starts paying attention to you, because the environment reacts before the person ever does. People shift around you without knowing why. Conversations get strange. Faces tighten. Rooms feel different when you walk in. You say a single sentence, and someone across the space glances at you like you changed the mood without lifting a finger. That's the side effect of being flagged by someone who operates in the shadows. They don't send messages or announcements. They watch the ripple your energy makes. They watch how the world bends around you. They watch the places where your presence disrupts predictable patterns. And lately, your disruptions have been loud without you speaking a word. People detected a change they can't categorize. They detected a seriousness in your posture that wasn't there before. They detected a growing steadiness in your gaze, a shift in the way you move, a weight in the way you exist. That's what caught their attention. That's what made someone with real reach stop scrolling through their internal catalog of variables and place a mental pen right on your name. And here's the part nobody warned you about. Once a behind-the-scenes operator flags you, you don't go back to normal. Your life becomes a monitored corridor. Not by cameras, by instincts, by impressions, by the psychological reflexes of people who sense something rising in you long before you say it out loud. You've been breaking ceilings quietly. You've been changing direction without announcements. You've been evolving in ways your environment can't absorb. And that's what triggers the watchers, not the public ones, the hidden ones. That's why everything feels like it's tightening. That's why your emotions feel heavier. That's why your emotions feel heavier. That's why your intuition won't sit still. Someone with real power just moved you from the ignore category into the track this category. And now you're living in the aftermath of that decision. They're watching how you move. They're studying your shifts. They're replaying your name at inconvenient hours. And the funniest part? You still think you're the one trying to figure out what's going on. Meanwhile, someone with resources you'll never see is sitting in a room somewhere thinking about you more than you think about yourself. That's how these people operate. They don't show their face. They don't announce their interest. They don't tap you on the shoulder and introduce themselves. They pull a single string and wait to see which parts of your life start rearranging. And lately, the rearrangement has been impossible to ignore. Your days feel charged. Your interactions feel off. Your decisions feel like they're carrying extra weight. You're walking through your routine, but something about the air around you isn't the same. That's the mark. Not the visible kind, the energetic kind, the psychological kind, the kind where someone with pull flags your presence, and suddenly the world reacts like you stepped into a new tier without being briefed. You've been waking up differently, not anxious, alert. That subtle difference matters. Anxiety asks questions, alertness waits for answers. You've noticed the shift in people too. Some have grown cautious around you, like they're sensing something you haven't announced. Others have started acting strangely curious, popping into your life at odd moments, trying to get a read on you. And then they're the ones who avoid eye contact now, like you're carrying something they don't want to acknowledge. All of this is evidence of the same thing. Someone influential tagged your energy and the ripple hit everyone around you before it hit you one. People who operate in the background don't need to speak for the world to adjust. The adjustment happens naturally like a chain reaction. You move differently, they respond. You speak differently, they overanalyze. You detach slightly, they panic. And the person who started all this, they're watching with that quiet fascination reserved for rare variables. You've been mistaken for average your whole life. Not because you were average, but because you were quiet about your strength. You've always grown in corridors nobody bothered to inspect. You endured things privately. You rebuilt quietly. You sharpened your mindset without performing it for anyone. But that's exactly what made you stand out. People with real power don't care about showmanship. They care about the ones who evolve without applause, the ones who rise without witnesses, the ones who develop stability in environments intended to break them. They saw that in you. They saw the way you carry memories that should have ruined you, but somehow made you precise. They saw the restraint in your decisions, the way you don't rush, the way you don't crumble publicly, the way you don't weaponize your pain. That calm under pressure is rare, and nothing catches a power player's attention faster than someone who refuses to be shaped by their circumstances. You've been moving like someone who outgrew their surroundings months before realizing it. The people around you still see the older version of you, the one who tolerated too much, stayed too long, bit their tongue too often. But the new version, the one forming under your skin, that version carries weight. That version feels expensive. That version has eyes that don't look away. That version has boundaries carved out of past experiences, not temporary moods. And the person watching you picked up on that before you did. They saw the shift in your stance, the firmness in your voice, the way your energy no longer bends for convenience. They saw someone who started owning their value quietly, someone who started taking themselves seriously without asking permission. And once you step into self-respect at that level, it's impossible for people who operate in high spaces to ignore you. You probably think you're just navigating life with a bit more focus, a bit more awareness, a bit more caution. But to someone trained to detect patterns, your shift looks like a signal flare. They track something in your timing. Your adjustments, your reactions, your refusal to spiral, your ability to stay composed even when things feel unfamiliar. They noticed you handling challenges with a steadiness that doesn't match your environment. They saw the difference between who you used to be and who you're slowly becoming. And now they're curious. They're trying to understand what forged that composure. They're trying to decode the blueprint of someone who should have broken but didn't. They're trying to determine why your growth didn't match the projections of your surroundings. That curiosity alone is enough to place you in their mental catalog. And here's where it gets chaotic. The moment someone with influence marks you as interesting, your life shifts into a different temperature. The smallest choices start carrying major momentum. A sentence you say casually gets interpreted like strategy. A moment of stillness gets analyzed like preparation. You walk into a room and people sense you differently, even if they can't articulate why. That's not because you've changed your personality. It's because your energy is no longer unclaimed. You've been acknowledged by someone who operates above the visible layers of life, and that acknowledgement carries a gravitational pull. The world around you senses the shift before you process it logically. Your instincts start picking up on subtleties you previously ignored. Tones, movements, glances, patterns. You're not paranoid, you're adjusting to the new altitude. Let's talk about the heaviness you've been feeling. It's not exhaustion. It's the weight of your untapped potential pressing against its container. Someone flagged you because they saw what you haven't fully accepted. That you're transitioning into a version of yourself that doesn't fit your old life. They noticed the impatience building inside you, the discomfort with stagnancy, the way you outgrow conversations midway through them. They saw that restless intelligence forming behind your eyes, the sharpness in your perception, the maturity in your reactions. These qualities are easy to overlook when you're busy surviving, but to a power player, they're signals. They indicate readiness, they indicate capability, they indicate momentum. You keep thinking you're behind in life, Meanwhile, someone influential saw you as ahead of schedule. You keep thinking you're late. Meanwhile, they saw acceleration. You keep thinking you're just trying to stay afloat. Meanwhile, they saw someone adapting like a strategist without ever being trained as one. They're not impressed with your progress. They're intrigued by the direction. They don't care about your achievements. They care about the mindset fueling them. They're analyzing the parts of you hide, not the parts you showcase. People like them don't become invested easily. They've seen thousands of individuals chase relevance, beg for recognition, or crumble under pressure. But you're not operating from desperation. You're operating from growth. You're not trying to get attention. You accidentally earned it. You didn't try to stand out. Your evolution made you stand out. You didn't try to appear powerful. You became powerful quietly through choices nobody applauded. And that's the precise reason they flagged you. You represent a rising factor, a developing force, a potential shift in the landscape they monitor. You've probably felt a strange sense of being observed. Not in a dramatic way, but in the way your intuition keeps nudging you like you're being evaluated. Thoughts arrive sharper. Decisions feel weighted. Your emotions carry depth. Your instincts speak louder than your doubts. These internal changes aren't random. They're proof that you've stepped into a new level of awareness triggered by external attention. You're adjusting to being watched by someone who doesn't watch casually. People like them go straight to the root of someone's character. They study the fractures and the strengths. They watch how someone behaves under pressure. They evaluate not what you say, but how you respond when nobody is clapping, and your responses have been consistent, strong, disciplined, sharper than ever. That's what hooked them. This is where you need to pay attention. Once someone with real influence places you on their mental radar, they're not expecting entertainment. They're expecting evolution. They want to see how you handle obstacles. They want to see how you rise without applause. They want to see if your discipline holds when circumstances shift. They're watching to see whether your growth was a fluke or the beginning of a larger transformation. They're monitoring your composure, your focus, your direction, and whether you admit it or not, you can feel that evaluation happening. You can feel your life narrowing into a path that demands more from you. You can feel the urgency forming behind your decisions. You can feel the sharpened edges of your mindset becoming more defined. And here's the real twist. The reason this attention feels heavy is because you're stepping into a version of yourself built for bigger territories. Your old habits don't fit anymore. Your old fears don't control you anymore. Your old patterns don't interest you anymore. You've outgrown too many layers too quickly. That growth is what triggered the watcher. They saw a person evolving at a pace that doesn't match their surroundings. They saw someone breaking invisible ceilings quietly. They saw someone controlling their emotions with precision. They saw someone rising without noise, and someone like that becomes unforgettable fast. Now the question lingering in the air, the one they're trying to answer, the one you're starting to feel in your bones, is simple. What happens next? What does someone like you become once the world starts reacting to you differently? What does someone like you turn into after being flagged by someone who rarely flags anyone at all? What path unfolds when pressure turns into purpose? Because make no mistake, this isn't random and it isn't accidental. People who operate behind the scenes pick their targets carefully. They don't waste their curiosity on predictable individuals. They don't study people who crumble easily. They don't track those who move in circles too small to make a ripple. They look for rising currents. They look for unusual emotional strength. They look for unusual emotional strength. They look for minds that refuse to shut off. They look for people who reinvent themselves without creating spectacle. And somewhere along the way, you started fitting that description so perfectly that you triggered an instinct they trust more than logic. You might think your growth has been subtle. Quiet changes, small decisions, minor adjustments. But to someone reading patterns, your evolution has been loud. They saw you shift the way you breathe when you got serious. They saw you step back from distractions. They saw you detach from people effortlessly. When you recognized misalignment, they saw how your eyes started carrying a depth that wasn't there before. They saw how you stopped responding emotionally to things that once knocked you off balance. Every one of those tiny changes formed a larger picture, and that picture made them pause. And here comes the chaotic humor of the whole situation. You didn't upgrade your life for attention, you upgraded for survival. You upgraded because staying the same became more painful than evolving. But that unintended transformation ended up catching someone who shouldn't be watching you in the first place. Someone who's built their reputation on detecting threats, opportunities, and rising forces long before the public sees them. Someone who knows that the most dangerous individuals are often the ones who didn't realize they were becoming dangerous. This is where things get interesting for you. Because once someone behind the scenes marks you, your life moves into an entirely different landscape. You start noticing patterns you never cared about. You start catching yourself thinking from higher altitudes. Your decisions become sharper because you feel the weight behind them. You begin to sense that your words carry farther, your movements send signals. Your presence leaves impressions that don't fade. It's not arrogance, it's awareness. You're growing into a level that demands consciousness, and they're watching how quickly you adjust to that level. They're watching the way you absorb pressure like it's nothing. They're watching the way you adapt without announcing your adaptation. They're watching your mindset strengthen in real time. They're not studying the past version of you. They're studying the one unfolding right now. The one waking up inside your ribs with every boundary you set, every layer you shed, every instinct you listen to. People like them don't get impressed easily. They've seen too many people break under their own ego. They've watched countless individuals ruin themselves, chasing validation. They've observed people overestimate their potential and collapse under their own fantasies. But you're not moving like that. You're not loud. You're not reckless. You're not begging for recognition. You're not trying to perform your evolution. You're just becoming quietly, intentionally, efficiently. And that terrifies and fascinates the kind of person who moves behind the scenes. That's why they can't get you out of their head. That's why your name loops in their mind at odd hours. They're trying to understand how you went from overlooked to unavoidable. They're trying to determine whether your shift was triggered by pain, awareness, or something deeper. They're trying to understand how someone with your history managed to produce a level of emotional discipline that most people never reach. They're trying to identify your trajectory, whether you know it or not. You haven't been imagining the tension in your environment. People around you feel the shift too. Some react with curiosity, some react with insecurity, some react with insecurity, some react with confusion. They can't articulate it, but they sense you're not in the same category anymore. You don't respond the way you used to. You don't explain as much. You don't argue the way you once did. You don't chase conversations or approval. You move with a heavier internal compass now. And that change, alters the dynamics of every interaction, and the watcher sees that. They're analyzing how you affect your environment without even trying. They're studying the way people adjust around you, the way silence falls when you enter, the way tension rises when you speak with clarity. They're observing the gravitational pull forming around you slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. They're watching the emergence of someone who doesn't just survive their past, but weaponizes its lessons. You don't fully understand what you're becoming yet, and that's exactly why they're watching. They're trying to catch the moment when your potential snaps into identity. They're waiting to see when your self-awareness catches up with your capability. They're watching to see if the pressure strengthens you or fractures you. They're analyzing your resilience, your focus, your emotional bandwidth. They want to know if your rise is sustainable or flash-based. And every signal you sent so far suggests something they don't see often. Consistency under chaos. There's a dark humor to this situation. Because while you're over here trying to figure out why your emotions have been intense, why your instincts feel louder, why your decisions carry weight, someone behind the scenes, this is not someone who reacts emotionally or impulsively. This is someone who calculates, someone whose instincts are sharpened from years of watching people shift, collapse, rise, or implode. Someone who knows the exact moment a person becomes a threat or an asset. And when they looked at you, they didn't see something to dismiss. They saw something forming. That's the part you haven't fully accepted. You're not being watched because you're fragile. You're being watched because you're becoming influential without trying. Your presence is starting to create tension. Your choices are starting to carry impact. Your growth is starting to alter the way people behave around you. You don't see it the way they do because you're focused on surviving your internal adjustments. But someone behind the scenes saw the broader blueprint. They saw the arc, the direction, the expanding reach. They recognize the early signs of someone who will command space naturally once their identity aligns with their potential. And that's what fascinates them, the gap between who you've been forced to be and who you're starting to become. They can see the conflict, the questioning, the sharpening. They can see the internal rewiring that happens when someone stops living by reaction and starts living by intention. They saw the flicker of power before you owned it. They saw the ambition behind your restraint. They saw the confidence building quietly in your posture. They saw the maturity forming behind your eyes. None of this is accidental. You've been rearranging yourself from the inside out. And someone with real power spotted the shift before you articulated it. This attention isn't a burden, it's confirmation. The world doesn't tilt for people who pose no threat to the narrative. Hidden eyes don't study people who are predictable. Private rooms don't say your name unless something about you disrupted the usual pattern of things. And that's exactly what you did. Without raising your voice, without performing for attention, without chasing recognition, you simply evolved. And your evolution wasn't subtle. Not to someone trained to detect the smallest indicators of change. Let's talk about that internal sensation you've been carrying. The weight in your chest that feels like pressure and preparation at the same time. That's not anxiety, that's alignment. That's the moment before the next version of you stabilizes. You're transitioning between identities. Stepping out of who you were and stepping into who you're meant to be. And transitions like this never go unnoticed by someone who makes moves from the shadows. They watch people at the edges. The moment before the breakthrough, the moment before the shift, the moment before the shift, the moment before someone becomes undeniable. You're in that exact phase, the raw, uncomfortable middle where everything is changing but nothing has fully solidified yet. They want to see how you handle that tension. They want to see whether you panic or refine, whether you crumble or calibrate, whether you drift or direct. Everything about you right now is data to them, not the creepy kind, the strategic kind. They're studying things you overlook. The consistency in your choices, the maturity in your reactions, the steadiness in your emotional control, the intelligence behind your restraint. They're watching the way you carry your pain without broadcasting it. They're watching the way you adjust to discomfort. They're watching the way you move when nobody validates you. And here's the chaotic humor. They don't know whether you're aware of your own rise or if you're just naturally this composed under pressure. That mystery is exactly what keeps their attention locked. Most people either crumble visibly or overperform loudly. But you operate in the middle space where power is built, quietly aware, quietly disciplined, quietly transforming. That's unnerving to the kind of person who knows exactly what that combination produces long term. The reason your intuition has been restless is because you're tapping into a frequency you've never lived in before. You're not responding to life from the ground anymore. You're responding from elevation. You're sensing things before they unfold. You're reading people faster than they speak. You're detecting intentions before words leave their mouth. This sensitivity is not a flaw. It's the survival instinct of someone rising, and the watcher recognized it instantly. You probably noticed how certain habits feel childish now, how certain conversations feel beneath your attention, how certain people feel draining, how certain environments feel too small. That's not arrogance, that's expansion. You're growing into a self that refuses to shrink back into roles you've outgrown. You're not meant to stay where you were. Your rise is already in motion.